What would you do if you walked in and saw someone doing something with your paralyzed children that terrified you? Would you trust your fear or trust what you saw in your children's eyes? One father made the wrong choice, and then he made the right one. This story will stay with you forever. Welcome to the story room. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me take you back 18 months. Robert Harrison was a successful architect in Seattle. He designed beautiful buildings, created spaces where families made memories. He had a wife he loved, Catherine. Twin boys who made him laugh every single day. Jack and Jordan, 4 years old, full of life and energy. Life was perfect, until one Tuesday afternoon, when everything fell apart. Catherine was driving the boys home from their preschool play. Jack was wearing cardboard wings covered in glitter. Jordan had a paper sun taped to his little shirt. She sent Robert a photo while he was in a business meeting. He glanced at it, smiled, but didn't respond. Too busy. She called once. He let it go to voicemail. 20 minutes later, a drunk driver ran a red light at 70 miles per hour. The impact crushed the driver's side of the car instantly. Catherine died before the ambulance arrived. The boys survived, but barely. Severe spinal trauma. The doctors used words Robert would never forget. T12, L1 vertebrae damage. Paralysis. Wheelchairs. Probably forever. Robert buried his wife on a rainy Thursday. His sons watched from their new wheelchairs, too young to understand why Mommy wasn't waking up. Standing at her grave, Robert made a promise through his tears. I'll take care of them. I swear I'll keep them safe. But grief has a way of twisting promises into prisons. For the next 1.5 years, Robert became obsessed with control. He hired the best doctors money could buy. Specialists from Switzerland. Experimental treatments from Germany. Equipment so advanced it looked like something from a science fiction movie. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be safe. Everything had to be measured and controlled. But here's what Robert didn't see. His sons were disappearing. The boys who used to laugh and run and climb on everything grew silent. Their eyes, once bright with mischief, became empty and distant. They sat in their wheelchairs like prisoners, barely moving, barely speaking. Robert told himself it was the injury, the trauma, the loss of their mother. But deep down, he knew the truth. They hadn't just lost their mother. They'd lost him too. 3 months ago, a woman named Grace Miller knocked on his door. She was 29 years old, applying for a job. Housekeeper, cook, someone to help around the house. Nothing medical. Nothing specialized. Robert hired her because the house felt cold and empty, and maybe having someone else around would help. He had no idea Grace was about to change everything. Grace saw something in Jack and Jordan that no one else did. She didn't see wheelchairs. She didn't see limitations. She saw 2 little boys who were still fighting, even when everyone around them had stopped believing. And she refused to give up on them. For 3 weeks, Robert traveled for work. Big project in Denver. Important meetings. The kind of things that used to matter. While he was gone, Grace did something extraordinary. Something that would either save his sons or destroy everything. She worked with the twins in secret. Gentle movements. Soft stretches. Songs her grandmother had taught her when Grace's little brother had his own accident years ago. Her brother had been told he'd never walk again after a terrible bike crash. Today, he runs marathons. Grace believed in miracles. And she saw that same fighting spirit in Jack and Jordan. That Tuesday afternoon, Robert came home early. A meeting got canceled. As he walked toward the house, he heard something he hadn't heard in 18 months. Laughter. His sons were laughing. Robert walked down the hallway and opened the therapy room door. What he saw stopped his heart cold. The wheelchairs sat empty against the wall. Jack and Jordan were on the floor, on a mat, moving their legs with Grace's help. And they were smiling, actually smiling. For 3 seconds, Robert felt pure joy. Then fear crashed over him like a wave. What are you doing? His voice came out harsh, angry. Why are they out of their chairs? Grace looked up at him. I'm helping them, Mr. Harrison. Helping? Robert stepped into the room, his hands shaking. "You're not a doctor. You're not a therapist. You don't just—" He gestured wildly at the empty wheelchairs. "You don't do this. They don't need to be in those chairs all the time," Grace said calmly. "That's not your decision to make." The room went silent. Jack's bottom lip started trembling. Jordan's eyes filled with tears. "Get them back in their wheelchairs," Robert said.
"Now."
Grace looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. She lifted Jack first, whispering something soft Robert couldn't hear. Then Jordan. Both boys reached for her as she buckled them in. They reached for her, not for him. That hurt more than Robert expected. "I need you to leave," he said, his voice hollow. Grace stood up, wiped her hands on her jeans. "They were happy, Mr. Harrison. Just go." She walked past him without another word. The door clicked shut. Robert knelt beside his sons. Jack turned his face away from him. Jordan stared at the floor, small shoulders shaking with silent tears. "It's okay, buddy," Robert whispered, but his voice cracked. "Daddy's here." Jack wouldn't look at him. Robert stayed there on his knees, staring at the empty mat where his sons had been sitting, at the wheelchairs where they sat now, at his boys who wouldn't even meet his eyes. What did I just do? That night, Robert couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, staring out at the city lights, replaying the moment over and over in his head. His sons had been moving, actually moving, and they'd been happy.
And he'd stopped it.
At 2 a.m, Robert pulled up the security footage from the therapy room. He had to know what Grace had really been doing. What he saw changed everything. Week 1. Grace singing to the boys while they were still in their chairs. Patient. Gentle. No pressure. Week 2. The boys on the mat. Grace guiding their legs through slow movements. Jack giggling as she helped him reach for a toy. Week 3. Robert leaned closer to the screen. Jack's toes moved. Just barely. A small flex. But it happened. Robert rewound it. Watched again. It was real. He kept watching. Jordan reaching for Grace's hand with shaky fingers. Her squeezing gently. The boy smiling. A real smile. The kind Robert hadn't seen since before the accident. Then he heard Grace's voice, barely a whisper. "Lord, the doctors say they can't, but I see them trying. And trying is where miracles begin." Robert pressed his palms against his eyes. His chest felt like it was caving in. He'd yelled at her, humiliated her, sent her away for the one thing that had made his son smile in 18 months. He checked the live camera feed. Grace's room was empty, her bed untouched. She left. Then Robert found her, sitting on the floor of the boys' bedroom, wrapped in a blanket, back against the wall. Jack was curled toward her like she was home. Jordan clutched his stuffed elephant, breathing soft and steady. She hadn't left. After everything he'd said, she'd stayed with his sons. Robert stared at the screen. Why would she do that? He walked barefoot through the dark house until he reached the boys' door. Grace's eyes opened when he stepped inside. Robert's voice faltered. "I shouldn't have." "You told me to stop," Grace said flatly. Robert looked down at his sons, at the way Jack leaned toward her even in sleep. "I was wrong." Grace studied him for a long moment. Then she looked away. Robert realized that saying it wasn't enough. The next morning, Robert found Grace still on the floor beside the boys' beds. She'd stayed all night. "I watched the footage," Robert said quietly. "All of it." Grace's jaw tightened. "I saw their toes move. I saw them smile. I saw." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I saw them happy." Grace finally looked at him. "Then you know I wasn't hurting them." "I know." Silence stretched between them. "I need to understand," Robert continued. "How did you know to do that?" Grace didn't answer right away. Finally, she spoke. "My brother Daniel. He was 12 when he had a skateboarding accident. Broke his back. Doctors said he'd never walk again." Robert waited. "My grandmother was a physical therapist. She didn't accept it. She worked with him every single day for 2 years." Grace's voice softened. "He walks now. Runs. Lives a full life. And you learned from her." "I watched. I remembered. Grace paused. When I saw Jack reach for that toy on his third day here, his fingers moving just slightly, I knew. Your sons aren't finished fighting. Robert's throat burned. Why didn't you tell me? Because you wouldn't have let me try. Her eyes held his. You would have said I was overstepping. He couldn't argue. She was right. They need you, Mr. Harrison, Grace said quietly. Not your money. Not your protocols. You. 3 days later, Robert took the boys to see Dr. Mitchell, their neurologist. He insisted on new tests. Comprehensive scans. Everything. Dr. Mitchell was skeptical. We examined them 6 weeks ago, Robert. What are you expecting to find? Something's changed, Robert said. I need you to look again. The tests took an hour. When Dr. Mitchell studied the results, he stopped, removed his glasses, stared at the screen. What is it? Robert asked, heart pounding. Dr. Mitchell didn't answer right away. Finally, he spoke. There's nerve activity in Jack's lower lumbar region. Robert's breath caught. What does that mean? It means something is responding. Faintly, but it's there. It wasn't there 6 weeks ago. Dr. Mitchell pulled up Jordan's scan. His eyes widened. Muscle response in his right quadriceps. Not much, but measurable. He looked at Robert. What changed in the last month? Robert glanced at Grace, sitting quietly with the boys. Someone who refused to give up. Dr. Mitchell studied Grace for a long moment. Whatever you're doing, don't stop. Over the next 4 months, everything changed. Grace worked with the boys every single day. Robert joined them, learning the exercises, singing the songs, being present in ways he hadn't been since Catherine died. Jack and Jordan grew stronger. Their movements became more deliberate. Their smiles returned. Then came the morning that Robert had stopped believing was possible. In the therapy room, Dr. Mitchell and a physical therapist stood watching. Robert stood by the window, hands clasped like prayer. Jack stood on the mat. Grace's hands supported him lightly at the waist. You ready, sweetheart? She whispered. Jack nodded, his small jaw set with determination. Grace let go. Jack took 1 step. Then 2. 3. 4 unassisted steps before his legs wobbled and Robert caught him. Both of them sobbed. Jordan, watching his brother, pushed himself up. Took 2 shaky steps of his own before Grace caught him, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Mitchell wiped his eyes. 23 years in neurology. I've never seen anything like this. Robert held Jack close, looked at Jordan in Grace's arms, and whispered the first real prayer he'd said since Catherine died. Thank you. Thank you. 10 months later, the Harrison Recovery Initiative opened its doors. A foundation funding unconventional therapy for children with spinal injuries. Approaches rooted in hope, persistence, and love. Grace became the program director. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Robert stood at the podium. Jack and Jordan stood beside Grace. Standing. No wheelchairs. No assistants. 18 months ago, I thought my sons' futures were over, Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. I thought accepting their limitations was the responsible thing to do. He paused, looked at Grace. I was wrong. Hope isn't reckless. Giving up is. And sometimes the most qualified person in the room is the one who refuses to accept impossible. The applause was thunderous. That evening, in the therapy room where it all began, Jack and Jordan raced toy cars across the floor. Standing, wobbling, laughing with pure joy. Grace sat on the mat, watching them with quiet pride. Robert joined her. You gave them their lives back, he said softly. No, Grace smiled. They were always fighting. I just refused to let them fight alone. The wheelchairs sat folded in the corner, covered with a sheet. Unused. No longer needed. Jack climbed into Robert's lap. Daddy, can Miss Grace read us a story? Of course, buddy. The one about the train, Jordan added. I think I can do that, Grace said, smiling. As evening light filtered through the windows, Robert realized something. He'd come home that day expecting to find his sons trapped in their limitations. Instead, he'd found the woman who would free them all. Not through medicine alone, but through something doctors couldn't prescribe. Love. Presence. and the quiet, unshakable belief that miracles still happen when someone refuses to give up. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that hope is real, that miracles happen, that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is believe in the impossible. Thanks for your watching. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to the Story Room for meaningful stories that inspire and teach life lessons.